got Brian Walker from Bloomreach. So Brian has been at quite a few notable companies prior to Bloomreach. He was with Expedia, Forrester, and Amazon.
That's right, amongst others.
Yeah.
Hence the gray.
Yeah. And then we've got Dina Apostolou. She's got quite a job at Contentful. She runs content, customer, and partner experiences. Sounds like 3 jobs in one. Yeah.
Yes, like all of us. Right?
Yeah.
We do have multiple jobs.
Which
Yep.
is why we generate AI.
That's right. So actually, let's start our conversation with composable architecture. Tom, you hit on this early on in your presentation. Composable and mock get used interchangeably quite often. Mock, for those of you who don't know, stands for microservices, API first, cloud native, and headless. So Brian, can you help us make sense of all those buzzwords I just rattled off?
Yeah, buzzword bingo. Well, I feel like I'm really put on the spot with people here in the room, including fellow mock members and others who are even running for the mock board who are here in the room along with myself. Composable in my mind is really maybe a relatively new term, coined a few years ago by Gartner. But really, from my vantage point, we've been doing composable certainly since really the early days of e-commerce, right? Bringing in best-of-breed solutions to complement your solutions. Composable does imply that this is easier now. And so when people are talking about composable solutions, it's really about taking or leaving feature function within a platform environment and bringing in best-of-breed solutions. Mock, in a sense, is a set of sort of technical principles that should be making that a lot easier with solutions that are API first, microservices based, and obviously cloud native, and tend to be a newer generation of solutions that are really positioned to do that. Doesn't mean that everything out of the box is gonna work seamlessly or everything's pre-integrated, but obviously there's a lot of qualities to mock-based solutions that offer a lot of benefits. But they are somewhat interchangeable in the sense that they're all about agility and flexibility, and that's really the main principle. So you can sort of think of them as sort of 2 levels of that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dina, I'd love to.
You're nodding your head. That's a good sign.
It's a good sign. Yeah. Well, let's.
Been on this journey 2.5 years, so it's all relating.
Yeah, I'm happy to build upon what you were just saying. So you took the technological definition, and I would say also it's a new way of working as well. When you start to think about the composable way, there's this whole new way of like how organizations are working together around the table between technical and business. And we're seeing more of it being a business-led discussion, really, around the problems that you're looking to solve versus it being first and foremost about the technology you need to go purchase. And so we're seeing those kind of shifts with the market, our customers, those industries. It happens across all industries, really. And so composable is a great way that addresses both the prerequisites that you're working with, I think, the same baseline, kind of architecture under the surface that makes it agile, connecting to enterprise systems for where you need to bring in your data, your content, your product information, all of your CDP type of information together. But most importantly, I think it is really changing the dynamic between teams. And so I think that that's probably one of the biggest shifts that we've seen with some of these newer terms and these new approaches to solving problems.
Yeah. Tom, in your example, you had a really great way of how you used mock to modernize your CX. Can you give us an example of what you did?
Yeah, well, so maybe I can even pile on a little bit on this because it's interesting as well. As part of our e-commerce journey over the past 2.5 years, I would say, pretty much follow those same principles. And I think a couple important points come out of that. One is you've got to have that vision, and then you have to have those principles, because if the team isn't working together, understanding what we're doing, that's an important part of it. One other piece of that was really, I think, proven a lot of value for our organization is thinking in terms of events that are happening in our organization. So everything we do, all the data that's coming from our core systems out into our e-commerce world, We talk about events, we think about events, that's how data is moved around, that's how we consume data. And we take that all the way down into the client application to your point about the UX experience. So literally, we can, if we wanted to, we could update a product in our IPIM system, and a second later it could show up on your mobile device if you were looking at that product detail page. So events through the whole thing, and it really frames it for the team. Here's how we operate, here's how we build things. And you know, in our e-commerce team, we've got 6 teams that are all working together. So it's a big group to move things forward this fast, and you know, that part has really been helpful.
Yeah. Well, piling on to the data piece of it, Megan, I'd love to hear how you're making data more consumable for retailers and perhaps creating the next best actions based on that.
Sure. I mean, that's a really, really big question.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if this is on.
It's not on.
It's not.
Do you want one?
You want
Okay.
I'm good. I can talk. I'll be fine. I taught 5th grade. This is a big open question, right? So we can see the horizon with ChatGPT, right? You can see how if ChatGPT knew everything about your data, your infrastructure, how you use it, what you've documented on it, how it would be so much easier to get to that point where you're like, I would like to know average weekly sales by store for the last 5 fiscal years and just have it pop up. We're not quite there yet, right? So Starbucks has high standards for our customer data privacy, and we haven't gotten to that point where we're willing to put our information into ChatGPT. But what we do to get there is we have built out a very skilled functional org for data analytics insights. And then over time, we have built and streamlined and built and streamlined and built and streamlined. So what we're doing within Global is to take the very best of what we've done in North America and play it out, bring it forward, and adapt it to the markets, right? So one of the differences in business model at Starbucks is our international markets are licensee. So they have very different ways of thinking about their business than we do internally. So there's not just one solution that will meet everyone's needs. And finding that nuance, having that conversation before you build is, you know, the thing that we spend so much time on. We can't turn out a dashboard or insights or a model driving a dashboard for the next best action until we understand how they think about their businesses.
Yeah, yeah. I love that phrase too, next best action. It's pretty commonly used at Starbucks, correct?
It is. It's shifted and changed over time. A lot of times you'll see models that predict next best action embedded in things and not explicitly called out anymore.
Yeah. Well, when we spoke on the phone, you had mentioned something that I found really interesting around pricing strategy for franchisees. Mm-hmm. I'd love for you to share that with the audience here.
Can you be more specific?
Sure.
I think about pricing all the time.
So you had mentioned that there's some barriers you encounter based on location of each franchisee and what different strategies you take based on there.
Sure. Well, you say Italy as an example. Italy has tons of mom and pop espresso shops all over the place. So one place the Italian licensee won't take price is espresso, right? Like you just can't. It's everywhere. It's like you can't do it. You can take price on the things that differentiate you in that marketplace, and every marketplace wants something different. So within Italy, you might consider a pricing action that includes your cold beverages, your frappuccinos, things of that nature, where you'll find you just won't with espresso. And this changes by market, right? So in the Middle East, you'll have different flavors of beverages that really differentiate Starbucks in that market from surrounding coffee shops. And that's where you'll really consider taking a bigger action, right? But you need to know, like my team as data scientists, we can have the conversation, but we don't live and work in every market for whom we're turning out models. So we really have to trust their business expertise, and we have to build to that. So often our models might produce something that is different from what the business leaders think is appropriate for that market. So we have to be very nimble.
One interesting data point you shared in that same conversation was 60% of all Starbucks drinks are iced beverages. I thought that was mind-blowing.
There were some major shifts in the pandemic. So we moved from like the I'm at work buying a cup of coffee maybe with my friend style orders driving a lot of our business to families in cars showing up at drive-thru. We also saw a shift in people making coffee at home. And the coffee you make at home is probably drip, might be French press, but you're not making cold brew at home, right? You're not making refreshers at home. And so the whole, I won't say the whole business model shifted, but we definitely started to emphasize cold very early in the pandemic. And we found that out early through analysis, right? Like as soon as the stores shut down, everyone in the org was like, oh my God, what's happening, what's happening, what's happening, what's happening? Broke all the forecasts, of course, right? Gone, dead. They came back eventually. But we spent months trying to figure out, okay, as we reopen, what are these new patterns? What are these new habits? Central business districts, like maybe just coming back now. How do we change and how do we support our business partners in changing to adapt to those very new trends that no one could have predicted at any point?
Yeah, coming from Chicago, iced drinks are just not my thing. So collecting this type of data in a responsible way is critical, as Cam mentioned in his presentation. So Tom, what has US Foods done to make sure that you earn the trust through providing secure data collection?
So I am with the organization, total of 5 years, but the last 3 I came in through an acquisition. And I'll say just in general, I'd say it's been kind of a first principle about data security. And I think that we're all probably in the same boat of it's never enough when you see like all these big organizations getting breached one way or another, and then you learn just how easy it is for one user on one desktop with access to something, and they click on the wrong PDF document, and boom, your system's blown wide open. So I would say, over the past year or so, we really have a renewed focus on thinking about that and testing our organization. You guys are probably all doing this, but you'll get an email and you're like, oh, it's from HR, let me click on it. It's like, busted, right? So, but that I think that's probably weaved into our DNA as we think about it. Even to our API endpoints, in the past you would say, how do you secure things? And you might be surprised how many of your APIs might be wide open if someone knew how to make the call. Mm-hmm. Well, at the front door, we know who the person is coming in, and so we've got a number of layers of those types of things. So yeah, I think it's really become a first principle of how we operate at our organization.
Yeah. So we heard a lot about generative AI in almost everyone's presentation today. But Brian, I'd love to hear from you how you feel that generative AI is going to impact commerce going forward, and if there's any new channels you think that will be opened up in the commerce space because of it.
There's a lot to cover with that, so I'll just try to hit a couple things. But I think certainly one of the things that we've all been working on for many years is personalization in the e-commerce space. And one of the biggest barriers to personalization or optimization has been content variations. Content is also very expensive. So many organizations in the e-commerce space are kind of struggling just to keep their head above water on the content to just even create one version of what they're going to represent to customers, let alone many versions that you can test with and optimize. And certainly the cost of content plus the fact that you need all these variations means that generative AI represents a kind of a potential unlock for personalization to actually start to work on things beyond just products, right? There's a reason why the product catalog is easy to attack. You have lots of variations, right? But obviously there's a lot of other ways we should be thinking about personalizing the experience, not just even offers, but also brand imagery, right? Why am I seeing the same thing you are when your interests, your tastes, your background, other things are different? And certainly there's a way now we can approach that. It's very early days, and there's going to be a lot of challenges, and there's going to need to be some guardrails defined around intellectual property and other things that are going to be important. but certainly generating a 3D image off of a flat photograph of a product, putting it on a variety of models that represent, you know, the diverse country and world that we are all in. You know, that's a kind of a breakthrough. And then being able to do a lot of variations around not just text, but imagery that can be tested, optimized, and personalized with. So that's kind of on the back office in a sense. On the front office, you talked about it as well earlier that, look, we're going to get really comfortable, all of us, very, very quickly, searching for information in a conversational way, right? It's not new. Obviously, we've been talking to our watches and our cars and appliances and smart speakers now for a while. I'm still kind of a Luddite on that. I tend to not really do that, but that's just habit, really. It's not necessarily for any other reason. But the keyword-based parametric way in which we've done product discovery, information discovery, that's rapidly evolving. And what's going to be even more profound is that many customers are going to feel they're getting a better experience versus hunting and pecking through what are now very noisy and not very good user experiences like Amazon, like Google. I mean, it's just been completely overtaken by a different monetization model, advertising. And now the user experience isn't very good. And so we're all kind of experiencing that, you know, as a society. Consumers are going to start expecting a different experience. And that's going to really have a massive impact. Maybe not 6 weeks from now, maybe not 6 months from now, but definitely in the near future, I would expect to see some real dramatic evolution in how we shop. And you talked about channels. An example would be our smart TVs at home. You know, you just got a smart TV. I'm sure you can already talk to it, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, it used to seem like a really dumb idea to sit down and shop by talking to your television, okay? And it still probably is a bad idea. But soon, that experience could actually be one that I could foresee myself doing in my PJs on a Saturday morning with my cup of coffee, Starbucks, and you know, interacting in that way. And it might actually suddenly be like, you know what, this system seems to know more than the associate in the store or really any other resource. Suddenly it starts to become a conversation I'm having with a system and it actually knows more. That will be a dramatic change. And I think it'll also bleed into in-store environments and a host of other things. Look, we've all made the mistake of predicting these kinds of things as imminent, and we'll have to see what the customer actually, how they respond to these kind of things. But it has the potential to have a fundamental change of how we interact in these systems. And then obviously, as technology providers, we've got to provide, you know, tools that are going to be compatible and supporting that in a variety of ways.
Yeah.
There's a big generational thing to it as well, right? Like, you kind of create those habits in your teens and early 20s, and if you look at where our kids are today, like, they're not going to want to type on keyboards, right? I mean, so we're, maybe we won't talk to our TV, but our kids are going to be talking to the TVs, and it's going to be like, what? It's normal. And I just, like, every time I have to talk to a device, I feel like is anybody watching?
Yeah, it's phenomenal how fast and sponge-like they can absorb the new innovation.
Just their mindset, you know, when growing up, we were like looking for things that are interesting. They filter, right? There's so much interesting thing coming, right? The TikTok generation of get in, get out in 15 seconds. I feel like that's how they want to buy stuff. That's how they want to do things, right? Because there's an overwhelming amount of information that is interesting.
The risk, of course, is it's going to really consolidate what gets shown and how it gets shown in those kinds of environments. So you can imagine like the Google type search or an Amazon type marketplace search. Well, you know, now you're down to really only one spot in that search results matters. Now it might matter differently for different people. So it'll be more important for product companies to CPG and so forth to be even more micro-focused on their assortments, but only a handful can even do that. So it will have a pretty dramatic downstream effect as well.
Yeah.
There's like two dimensions to that. One dimension is the manufacturers, the content creators will have to get really good at explaining why their product is different, right? And on the other side, from the seller perspective, can you be a better expert than all the other ones out there that understand your customer, that are going to point you to that, right? So we've got the good data, and we've got the good matching of that data with the users, and that feels like kind of what the future ends up being.
Yeah. Dina, I'd love to hear from you. What are certain customer behavior patterns that you've observed at Contentful specifically?
Yeah, and we talked about this, and I would say one of the biggest things is we are seeing customers starting to work smarter, not harder. And so even from COVID to now, with just
there's
the
a gap
economy.
between those now. That's
Well,
good.
it's like, no, I'm just saying, you know, it hits every industry, right? When you're thinking about the pressures and the reduction of budgets and reduction of workforce and hiring and all of those types of things. And so more so companies are just globally diverse. And so they're having to think about how do you make smarter investments that can scale across regions, even if you've made those technology decisions for a certain need maybe in one region. Let's understand the problems you're trying to solve in other markets as well. And so one of the examples that I really do like, Rafa Cycling Company, and this really hit obviously during the pandemic, but their app was really about engaging their communities. And so it was really community-based offers, local shops, events, cycling bios. And what they started to see is obviously with COVID, everyone was starting to interact more with the app and they expected more, right? They wanted to see more product information. They wanted to see more content, which was traditionally hosted on their website. And so that behavior, just drew them to needing to kind of rethink what they were doing there, and the engagement, the minute that they started to add in more product information, more content, cycling courses, those types of learning how-tos for at-home use, it really started to shift their customer experience, and now they've started to think about that way of now bringing their website property into that composable approach. And I love that example because it's going back to what I said, it's the development teams and the business teams around the table that are really starting to benefit from it. It's the brand team that's also starting to benefit from this. You're not sticking your content in a bunch of different silos and different systems for the devices that you need your content to show up at. And so that's some of the shifts that we are seeing with trends with our customers, and you have to think about that, right? It's all about like, how do you deconstruct it, bring your content together, get it organized, reuse it. It's the same mantra with data, right? Your content is producing data. You can't have this sitting in every system as silos, right? So whether that content is being used internally for your legalese and terms and conditions, and you need to collaborate with those teams, to the product information that's going to be, sitting on your, knowledge center, right? Or in your product catalog. You need to have it all organized and structured, and that's just helping teams around the table now to work a lot more efficiently.
Absolutely. I think back to, Brian, what you said about personalization, and I want to bring us all back to that. While personalization is nice, is there any time we could do it wrong? Megan, I'd love to hear.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the joys of being at Starbucks is sometimes there are multiple people in that car. Some of them are vegetarians, some of them are meat eaters. You offer me a meat sandwich, I'm going to be offended. I wouldn't be offended, but I'd be like, oh, that's Jess. That's not me, right? So people are really clear, even though we're not really clear from our data, exactly who wants what in that family, right? So that's one way it can go wrong. I think one of the things I hope to see in the future is the ability to turn it off. You just flip the switch. I don't want to see personalized offers because I feel like I'm in a bubble and my view is too small. Turn it off, see all the things. Great, now I see the whole range, turn it back on, fine. That would be delightful, right? I'm a bit of a Luddite also. I do like to see the whole landscape, especially for large TV purchases. So I think something like that would be delightful, and then people would have a sense of, when am I being driven in a particular direction, when am I being marketed to in a particular direction, and then when can I decide not to do that anymore?
Yeah. Brian, do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that, yes, can go wrong. And there's been a lot of examples of where it has gone wrong in different types of organizations. And I think that's an example. It's obviously one of the key things to really pay attention to is that every customer's context changes, and one of the sort of earlier generation of sort of product recommendation and personalization systems, of course, were very focused on past purchases, right, or maybe abandoned carts and other signals. And so the next time I show up, you're going to try to use that information and kind of point me down a funnel. But now I might be in a very different context. And as an example, this actually dates back to my days at Expedia when we were implementing fairly, I would say, crude customer segmentation across marketing and user experience. And I say that because at the end of the day, it wasn't that many segments, and we were using the technology we sort of had at hand to do this and kind of wade in. And the natural sort of inclination was to say, okay, classify customers based on what kind of traveler they are. Business traveler, leisure traveler, spontaneous, blah, 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 blah. And yet they were forgetting to think about the end customer when they did that, realizing that the customer's context changes every time they come to the site. So the most important thing I think we often forget is ask the customer. Ask the customer, what is it that you're looking for today? How can I help you? And also, the notion of, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the concept, zero-party data, right? Actually asking the customer, how do they want the experience to be tailored to them? And is that something you want me to remember? Great, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have a fine-grained, attribution model on my customers, and I'm going to be able to do that. And ironically, we just don't really do that very often, and we don't do it very well. And it seems like, you talk about first principles, it's like, this is pretty common sense idea. It's not like,
Why are we afraid to ask our customers one question that we want the answer to help them go somewhere,
and
right?
again, conversational experiences will flip that on its head. And actually, that will be how the whole thing starts, and it'll be up to us to make sure that the systems can come together to create that kind of an experience. And so, actually, that will probably change pretty quickly, driven by how the customer will want to engage. But today, we kind of forget that, and we're trying to be a little too tricky, almost, in terms of how we think about using data and optimization to drive personalization, and I think that's one of the reasons why we often get it wrong.
I find it intriguing, like, when can personalization stop? The other day I was looking for a yellow dress for a wedding. This must have been 2 weeks ago. I'm still getting yellow dress recommendations. I think I'm over this. So when can it stop is like the question. Enough with the yellow, we're on to a different color. But to that point, when does it stop? When does it realize like we're beyond the time of purchase and to move on to the next recommendation?
But then to say that customers, there's been lots of surveys and good data out there, very statistically significant research that's been done on this, and actually, and it does increase as you look at younger cohorts, but customers want personalization, actually. And the reason why they want it is it saves them time. And for a lot of times we're shopping, it's kind of a task, it's something we need to fulfill, or we might be in a hurry, and so on and so on. But also, I don't want to have to wade through stuff that isn't relevant to me. I actually want it to be personalized and relevant. Well over 3/4 of customers now would say that, and the younger cohorts even more so, because they have even less time, attention span, as you kind of referred to earlier. So I think, it's important that we recognize that customers actually want it, but they want it to be better.
Dina, I'm going to quote you because I loved what you said. Content is producing data and needs to be guided by data. I think that's so great. How are you guiding content creation and preventing those data silos that happen?
Well, I think it's easy to say that like data can inform, right, the experience you want to go build and where you push content. But at the same time, when you think about where content's sitting, right, whether that is, through voice, the wearables, the social media, your website, your applications, it's collecting data at the same time, right? It's collecting, you're looking at a red carpet event and then you start to now search for that same pair of glasses, right? And you start your search in that path, and you want to make sure that the information that you find on the website or the mobile application is the same. It's the same style. You want to find the colors. You want to find all of those things. And so from the point of maybe an editorial experience and kind of lifestyle to, what becomes kind of a commerce and a storefront experience, you really have to start thinking about where you're capturing all that data. So it's this feedback loop that is constantly happening. I think if you were to go back, decade two, you would think about content is sitting over there and it's kind of just brought in at the 11th hour. I don't think content was really thought of as it's the deconstruction of words and images and videos and text and voice, and you go down like all of that pathway. And so I really don't separate content and data. I really don't. To me, it's this feedback loop, right? And you can make your content smarter with the data. You need to make sure that you're capturing it to the point that you were saying, right? Even from the point of conversation, right? With a conversational bot, you need to make sure that you're capturing that, whether that's sitting in a CDP or a home-built system or whatever you might be using. There's a lot of product systems that capture all of that for when you're browsing products and putting them in your cart. It's so important to capture that, to be able to just have that enrichment of when you're trying to create segments, when you're trying to deliver that next best, experience to your customers. And that's why I kind of go down that path. And that's what's, we're seeing more of the decisioning with our customers around the problems they're trying to solve. And it's typically about KPIs, business outcomes, right? You're starting there and you're working backwards. And then you're thinking about, okay, what problems are we solving for which use cases? Right? What technology is going to be able to help us to get there? What things do you have? What best of breed, systems do you need to look at? And that's kind of the approach that I think we share some mindset around, with our partners around, composable and kind of the mock, kind of sense of prerequisites.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we've been talking a lot about data, but data is really just enhancing the experience that we're all having as consumers, right? So when you walk into a store, you're having an experience. Like I can tell the difference between an Anthropologie, a Lululemon, and a Target without even seeing the logo on the door. And yes, those are the three places I shop often. But how do we differentiate the in-store experience with the online experience when so many of these online experiences feel turnkey? Brian, you and I talked about this a little bit on our call. I know you had some thoughts on it. What do you think about making that unique?
I think the role of the store has to, in the future, has to be around, a destination experience. And I think actually stores are going to need to really think about that. And of course, the role of the store will turn more and more into in a sense, a service center. This is about fulfillment and customer support, and customer service. And a lot of customers, when they have a reason to go, will go like that, right? Whether it's picking something up and so forth. But our lives have changed dramatically, is to put an understatement on it. And the busyness of everyone and the kind of the frenetic, especially if you have kids and you have a family and you have, multiple incomes in the household, like we don't shop that way anymore. Really, because of the convenience factor, unless it's a chore and a task. More and more customers, I mean, we track through Bloomreach across our customer base. We call it Commerce Pulse. It's a aggregation of all the different customers that we're serving, and we can sort of see different trends. One of the things that we sort of expected coming out of the pandemic was that online grocery, for example, would, everyone was sort of expecting that it might decrease. It's actually continuing to grow, and it's growing far faster online than offline. And we see that's true in the overall retail sector. So even though the media was talking a lot about return to store, and there's an awful lot of press about return to office, and obviously there's a lot at stake in the media, and obviously the broader economy around that. When you actually look at the data, e-commerce continues to take market share. Long story to get to the point of saying, look, the physical and digital really need to come together. And I do think some of the experiences we've been talking about here today illustrate how you're going to want to think about ways to use technology in the physical environment to support and enhance the experience. And think about making it an experience when I go there, right? Versus it's really routine and it's a task. And those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be able to accomplish as faster online. or through these different kinds of interfaces that are going to be emerging. And so the physical stores have to really evolve the concept, in my mind, in order to continue to serve a role. And I think, you know, the path is fairly clear, but there's going to be a lot of impact on commercial real estate and many kind of large retailers in the process.
Well, I've got one question for all of you. So what advice would you give the audience today around the future of retail, whether it's in data or in experience or in content?
I think I'll build on a little bit on the retail store thing, because I think that's an interesting, you know, we're so used to working in the digital world now that things that we did 10 years ago seem almost odd. Looking at a menu, and rather than putting my readers on, I honestly sometimes try to pinch the menu bigger because I'm just so used to doing that, right? It's like, you go to a store, it's like, where's the star rating on the product? Well, I gotta now Google this product. Why can't I have a QR code that's, boom, here you go, right? What does this product look like? And that's probably, you know, I mean, I think you're taking the experience one step further. Some things you need that tactical, you know, I want to touch it as a shirt. It's something that it's very hard to experience online. But for many, many products, the online experience is a better shopping experience. And that blend, I think, is a real important distinction of what you're going to have in the stores for your customers to touch and feel and get them in and, you know, and build that, you know, that store brand, and what really deserves to be online. That's more of a, you know, commodity kind of just, I know what I want.
Well, if I could just comment back on it, something else that really sort of stuck with me is that, I don't know, I mean, I would challenge anyone here to say they had a physical retail experience that then seamlessly morphed into an engagement and relationship with the digital part of the business that felt like they even knew who you were.
Doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen. What low-hanging fruit is that, right? So that's an example where, you know, we've got to be thinking about these channels more cohesively. I mean, I go for men's suiting, I might go once every year, maybe every other year, right? I'm going to drop a lot of money when I go in for men's suiting because I probably don't like to do it. Not going to name names, but you know, here I might spend a lot of money on putting together some really core pieces of a wardrobe, and I'm sure, speaking to a lot of people here, would probably do much the same. And you know, as soon as I leave, like, there's nothing about, here's some things that you should maybe think about in order to extend the wear or use of this blazer or what have you, right? Doesn't that seem kind of obvious that that's an opportunity for us? So we're talking about using next generation large language models and techniques and tools, right, to drive personalization. And I think, you know, a couple of takeaways for me is, like, you know, think about the first principles around the customer experience and how to bring these channels together, and then leverage these tools to have a more natural interaction with customers so that you can ask them and do those kinds of things. And then, you know, think about how to then incorporate that into an ongoing customer relationship. Cost of customer acquisition is higher than ever, and it's going to keep going higher because the lens with which customers are engaging is narrowing. Therefore, you need to really think about how to serve customers, right? Once you've got them, make them keep coming back and spending more.
If I could tack on one more thought about user experience. Sometimes there's pieces that we don't even really think about. We try to channel our use of the internet. I'm going out there, I'm searching on Amazon, I'm searching for a TV. I don't mind spending time and kind of clicking and, you know, right, I get a spinner for a few seconds. In the B2B world, when you're working in a restaurant as a restaurant operator, it's 11 o'clock at night and you want to go home, you don't want to be shopping. It's not fun, and it's not fun when it arrives the next day and you got to get it put in your freezer, right? So they want to be keyboard jockeys. Literally, I want to be able to do 2 tab, 3 tab, 4 tab, and not have to click next page and spin and spin and spin. So, you know, maybe that's not as important to the person buying one product, right? But, you know, I buy this product every day. How can you make it easy? You know, think about that user, and right at the time thing. It's just becoming more important, especially as we age, right? Because you know, it used to be 1 minute was really a minute, but now it's you know.
Megan or Dina, any parting thoughts? Yeah?
I mean, I have my favorite soapbox, which is data are not magic, right? You're not going to get anything super fancy out of your data if you haven't put in the time and thought and effort to get them organized. They're not magic, no matter what your CEO says sometimes, still not magic. So always figure out where your secret little messes are in data, find a way to clean them up. And that enables so much more, because the data scientists, they want as much data as you can give them, as long as it's good data.
Yep.
I would say experimentation is key, but ensuring that you have a learning objective in mind. Because otherwise you're experimenting for the sake of, the next thing that is out there in market, and you're not doing it with complete purpose. But having that learning objective, even if it takes getting buy-in, from your leadership team or from the teams across different divisions, will help you, I think, to, kind of think about testing, learning, applying those insights, and iterating, your experiences. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I think is really important, even if it does take a little bit more time to plan, right, and get that buy-in, it will be critical for the agility of that experimentation.
Yeah.
Measure, measure, measure. You can't improve what you're not measuring.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time, and thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.